Hi guys, it's Christy and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I have been pretty absent on my YouTube channel recently, and I'm trying to ease my way back into, more regular filming. And so for this video, I thought I would do something just fun and lighthearted, and in honor of Valentine's Day, share my list of my favorite romantic films of all time. And I just thought this would be really fun because I love talking about movies and especially just, really good stories. So a couple of disclaimers I have to make before I get started is that, of course, these are my favorite romantic films of all time. So I may have left off a couple that are your favorites. If I did, definitely let me know down below. It could be that I just, wasn't thinking of them at the time that I was making my list. Another disclaimer is that these are all heterosexual love stories. Not to say that I haven't seen any same-sex romantic films. I definitely have. There just weren't any that stood out to me as top, epic love stories. But if there are any that come to your mind, definitely let me know down below and I'm definitely willing to check them out. And at the end of the day, it's really not that serious. This is just for fun, just my list of top 10. Who doesn't like making a list of their favorite movies? I just think that's the most fun thing to do. Sometimes if we're on a road trip for a long time, my husband and I will go through, or maybe I'm with my sisters or something, we'll go through our list of just if you had to pick top 5, and we'll go through each category, and it's just so much fun. I just love doing it and justifying my picks, you know what I mean? So the first one I have is Notting Hill. This is a film starring Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts, and it is about an ordinary man who meets an actress. She's a very famous actress. One day he bumps into her in a bookshop, and they start a relationship, and it's definitely not one that doesn't come with its bumps in the road. There are definitely setbacks for them along the way, as you would expect, when you have someone in the public eye, and then you've got an ordinary man living an ordinary life. And it's basically about the logistics of how those two would come to be in a relationship, and how they would make it work. And it's got some really great quotes in the film that are pretty recognizable still today. And I just feel like it's a really romantic film because it's one where the couples are sort of star-crossed, and they're basically beating the odds. And so I really like that love story. So my second pick is Shakespeare in Love, and this one, when I thought of it, I just thought this has to go in there because it is definitely a romantic film. And this movie stars Gwyneth Paltrow, and I can't think of the actor's name right now. Maybe I'll put it down below. Basically, this movie is about William Shakespeare, and this is before he's written Romeo and Juliet, and he is a well-known playwright. And he meets this woman who wants to be an actress, which of course women, don't act. Back in those days, men would play women, would play female characters. So this woman basically impersonates a man in order to act, and she and William Shakespeare start a relationship, and she is his muse for writing Romeo and Juliet. So this is a very romantic film. It's very mature. I wouldn't recommend watching it with your children for sure. It's not really a family film, but it is a great love story in my opinion, and I definitely thought it belonged on this list. Okay, so my third pick, if I had to choose a favorite out of all of these, I think this would have to be it. This one just definitely holds that special place in my heart, and it is Ever After. And I think, if I'm correct, this movie came out somewhere along 1998 or something. It stars Drew Barrymore, and it is a Cinderella story. So if you're familiar with the story of Cinderella, she loses her father at a young age and is forced to live with her stepmother and stepsisters who don't treat her very well. She's basically reduced to a servant, even though she should be of a good social standing by birth. She one day has to impersonate a courtier in order to save one of her family members who has been sold into slavery. So she's trying to save him, and that's when she runs into Prince Henry, and so they start a relationship even though he doesn't know the real her, and she kind of has to hide it from him. This movie, let me tell you, I remember going to see this movie for the first time when I was a little girl. I saw it with my aunt and my sister and I were obsessed with this movie. We could quote it, I am not joking. We could quote the entire movie like from beginning to end. And sometimes if we were like trying to fall asleep or something like that, we would just start quoting the movie and we would just like see how far we could get into it before we fell asleep. But if you're a fan of fairy tales and you just love a good romantic movie, definitely watch that one. So my next pick is the movie Jane Eyre, and I think I've seen multiple adaptations of this story. But my favorite is the one with Michael Fassbender. I think that's the most recent one that came out. But the reason I love this story so much is it's another one of those like underdog stories. Basically, she ends up falling in love with this man, this wealthy man, and it's romantic in multiple ways, okay? Number one, it's romantic because he really falls in love with her for, you know, her morals and her virtue and, you know, her being a strong-willed person and not willing to compromise on her beliefs and her values and things. It's one of those classic love stories, so if you're looking for something more of like a period piece, something a little bit more classic and traditional, then I definitely recommend that one. And so now, after talking about Jane Eyre, my next pick, of course, has to be Pride and Prejudice. And I'm talking about the version with Keira Knightley. Definitely more of a family film than, let's say, Shakespeare in Love. I love this story so much. I've read the book and I've seen multiple film adaptations of this story. It is so good. It's basically another one where you've got differences in class, but what's so great about this movie and this story in general, this love story, is that they start out disliking each other, you know, because they have these prejudices against each other and just, you know, their class and just assumptions that they make about each other. And it really goes to show that, you know, your first impression of someone definitely does not always stick and it's not always correct, and that, you know, relationships can grow. You know, this is definitely the sort of antithesis of these insta-love stories, you know, where people fall in love based on looks and based on, you know, superficial things. Anyway, I just think that this story is really romantic in very subtle ways. I also wanted to mention, if you're a writer, I did a video using Pride and Prejudice as an example of how you can use romantic tension to really keep your reader or your viewer engaged. And so yeah, I really like pick apart the movie and some techniques that the film especially uses to increase the romantic tension. So yeah, I'll link that down below if you're interested. Okay, so my next pick is Bridget Jones's Diary, and if you're not familiar, it's actually sort of a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. Bridget is this just average woman. She's a little bit overweight. She's, I believe, just past 30. She cusses a lot. She drinks. She's just sort of this ordinary woman that you can just kind of root for. But she is just hilarious, trying to, you know, find a boyfriend, ultimately find a husband. So she enters into a relationship with her boss, and then there's this sort of interesting dynamic with this man that she's known since they were children that she keeps bumping into, and it's so funny, and there are so many romantic moments in the film because it definitely highlights this just human connection between people. You don't always have to be the prettiest girl in the world. You don't have to be super hot and thin and, you know, have everything together. Sometimes people just connect on a human level, you know, and just based on similar interests and things. So yeah, that film is so funny. If you haven't seen it, you definitely should, and it's also very romantic, a very good pick for Valentine's Day in my opinion. The next one is Titanic, and this just has to be on there because, I mean, when you think of Titanic, you're mostly thinking of the love story. Like, regardless of the fact that the ship is sinking, it's really about these two people, Jack and Rose. So there's a lot happening with this love story. There's definitely the fact that Jack is helping Rose through this sort of identity crisis and this depression. She's suicidal at the beginning of the movie, which is pretty dark. He definitely brings out this light in her, and it's just really, I don't know, it's like magnetic or something. It's just, you can't help but just get really invested watching their love story unfold. I don't know how else to describe it, but I mean, most people have seen Titanic, but if you haven't, you should watch it. So my next film is Dirty Dancing. This is an 80s film about a girl named Baby and a guy named Johnny who teaches her how to dance and kind of, you know, opens her eyes to, you know, other people, other classes, and in their way of life. You know, she's kind of sheltered and doesn't really know everything that's happening to people. Yeah, this movie doesn't have, I can't really say that this movie has like a whole lot of depth to it, but it definitely delivers in terms of romance. So if that's something that you're looking for, I just think that it's a whole lot of fun, and I just always enjoy watching it. So my next one I have is called Hope Floats, and it's a movie starring Sandra Bullock, and it's about a woman who recently has been cheated on by her husband, and she and their daughter are basically starting a new life, trying to pick up the pieces of their life back in her hometown, her childhood hometown. She moves in with her mom, and yeah, she's basically trying to pick up the pieces. She never really had to work because her husband made a certain amount of money and she took care of their daughter. So now that, you know, she doesn't have a husband to support her, she has to work and try to figure out what she's good at. And she runs into a boy from her childhood who's now a man, obviously, played by Harry Connick Jr., I believe. It's just a really sweet film, and not only is the romance really sweet, but the film is just really inspiring if you've ever been at that point in life where you're kind of starting over. Okay, so finally my last choice for top 10 romantic films of all time is The Story of Us. So, I don't know if very many people have seen this film. It's a little bit older, and it stars Michelle Pfeiffer and Bruce Willis, and they're a couple that are going through a divorce. And you think, okay, that's not very romantic, but just hear me out. So basically the whole movie is about, is kind of, you know, a lot of flashbacks going back to times where their marriage was just crumbling, and in the present time they're, you know, they're actively pursuing this divorce. And it's sort of, as you're going through, it's this interesting storytelling as you're going through these flashbacks and then through what's happening in real time. It just really, it's so crazy because you feel like you're going through this whole relationship with them, and there's so much depth that you don't have in these other love stories where they're just meeting and falling in love for the first time. You don't have that kind of depth because this is really the whole history. You know, it's the story of the two of them and their marriage, their relationship, all these ups and downs that they've gone through. And I don't want to spoil the ending because like I think everybody should see it and just really like feel it all for the first time. So I don't want to spoil the ending, but I will say, even though it's about divorce, there's definitely plenty of romance, and I just think that this is a deeper romance than what a lot of these other films have, and so I just felt like it definitely deserved a spot. So that was my list of top 10 romantic movies of all time. I hope that if you haven't seen any of these, that maybe it inspired you to watch them, or maybe if you just haven't seen something in a while, you know, and inspired you to like give it another go. Yeah, so definitely let me know if you agree with me, if you think these movies definitely deserve their position in top 10, or if I missed any of your favorites, definitely let me know down below. So thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.